I am truly sensible of the high honor done me in this appointment. Yet I feel great distress from a consciousness that my abilities and military experience may not be equal to the extensive and important trust. I do not think myself equal to the command I am honored with. This is what George Washington said to the Congress when they commissioned him to lead the army. He should have tried raising children. Each of these words fits. I am truly sensible of the high honor done me in this appointment, yet I feel great distress from a consciousness that my abilities and military, that one might not be appropriate, but sometimes it feels like a fight, may not be equal to the extensive and important trust. I do not think myself equal to the command I am honored with. Child Training 101 Part 2, Parental Perspective. This is Child Training 101 because I do not have the wisdom, experience, or ability to go deeper than just 101. In fact, by the end of this, you might be thinking, why is he talking about this topic? And in fact, if you pay attention in this very lesson, I will admit that I am not qualified to be the one up here presenting these thoughts. But I pray that they are from the text, and if they are, then we will all learn from them. We have a number of visitors. We're grateful for your presence, and we pray that what we do is pleasing to God, and if it pleases to God, well, then it should please all of us also. And we pray that we are working together trying to serve Him. This is the second of these lessons. Part 1 was about the child's potential and the parent's responsibility. I delivered it 3 weeks ago. The idea was the child has great potential, both positive and negative. There's a lot of children who grow up to do horrible things. The horriblest, if I can invent a word, is to choose not to please God. The parents are given the responsibility of training the children. If I could quickly go through some new verses that emphasize this point. Genesis 48. This is where Israel, otherwise known as Jacob, is reunited with his son Joseph. Joseph is now in Egypt. Israel, Jacob, has come to meet him. He's going to bless him. Verse 8, when Israel saw Joseph's sons, he said, "Whose are these?" Joseph said to his father, "These are my sons," now listen, "whom God has given me here." This is about a perspective. 2 verses come to mind. Ezekiel 18:4. All souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. And Psalm 127:3 says, "Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward." This is about a perspective that Joseph has. He understands these little beings, these critters that are running around, are from God. This perspective will not be unfamiliar to Jacob. In Genesis 33, when Jacob returns from having been gone for more than 14 years with Laban, Jacob is meeting Esau, and when Esau sees him, Jacob's worried. That's another story for another day. Verse 4, Genesis 33:4, Esau ran to meet him and embraced him and fell on his neck and kissed him, and they wept. And he lifted his eyes and saw the women and the children. He said, "Who are these with you?" And Jacob's answer will be, "The children whom God has graciously given your servant." Again, this perspective. And not only, don't miss this, we'll bring this up later, graciously given. But Jacob here has the perspective, this little critter running around in front of me is a gift from God. Genesis 25. If we back up, we're going back and back. In Genesis 25, Isaac, so Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Isaac will say, verse 19, "These are the records of the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac. Isaac was about 40 years old when he took, or was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, and the sister of Laban, the Aramean, to be his wife. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren, and the Lord answered him. Now, it doesn't say right here, but we know Isaac's perspective. When that child came, Isaac understood this is a gift from God. In fact, God will specifically, explicitly say this in another text. To Isaac, I gave Jacob and Esau. In that same text, which is Joshua 24, God will say in the verse before, the one I just referred to, I took your father Abraham from beyond the river and led them through all the land of Canaan and multiplied his descendants and gave him Isaac. So this perspective from Abraham to Isaac, from Isaac to Jacob, from Jacob down to Joseph, these children are a gift from God. There is a joke. In my house, we do not say jokes. We do not tell jokes about God or Jesus, spiritual things. There is one here. I will refer to it. I will read it. You know it. I will make a point from it. When God passed out brains, I thought he said trains, and I missed mine. When God passed out looks, I thought he said books, and I didn't want any. When God passed out noses, I thought he said roses, and I asked for a big red one. We've all heard this. The picture in that joke is of people in line waiting to receive what God is going to distribute to them. That's what the picture is. This is the picture of this perspective. Each of these people has children. Each of them says, this is the child that God gave to me. God determines whether and when and what. And it is a gift, this child. Now, back up to Genesis 18. They all have this perspective. There's another perspective you'll see that they have or they should have. Talking about Abraham. Why did God give Abraham Isaac and the others? Well, in this text, the Lord is talking with Abraham. You can come back and read the rest of the context later. Verse 17, the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do to Sodom? Since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and in him all the nations of the earth will be blessed. For I have chosen him, now listen, my version will say, so that. Or some of your versions will say, I know that. The knowing being a special kind of knowing, the kind of special knowing that specially chooses you to do something. I have chosen him so that he may command his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord. Okay, there is purpose in being a parent. God gives the child to you, this little soul he puts in a body, that is a mystery. The rest of it is not. Although sometimes we think it is. He puts the soul in this body, and then he says to the body, I am delivering this to the adult, I'm delivering this child to you to train up the child in the way he should go. An investor takes his investment to the investment firm, delivers that investment to the investment firm and says, this is mine. I want you to increase its value. It's not yours to do anything. Your job is to increase the value, and then I'm going to take it back. This is exactly what God is doing with these little souls. Deuteronomy 4. So there he says it about Abraham. God's chosen nation starts with Abraham, and he says, I'm giving you children, and the point of having these children is to train them. He will require this of his nation. In Deuteronomy chapter 4, Deuteronomy chapter 4, having come out of the land having come out of Egypt and wandered for 40 years, they're now about to go into the land. Verse 9, give heed to yourself, keep your soul diligently. In the Septuagint, that word is the word of a guard at a prison. Prison guard your own soul. diligently, so that you do not forget the things which your eyes have seen, and they do not depart from your heart all the days of your life, but make them known to your sons and your grandsons. That word, make them known, is very interesting. The best way that I can think of illustrating it is of a duck, when it is born, very quickly imprints on its mother, whatever that thing turns out to be. And it can imprint on the wrong thing. It can imprint on a human. But this is the idea here. The idea is of melding two things together. It's not your normal word for make known something. It's take this little thing which is designed to receive this thing and put them together. A computer, when it is produced, they make the hardware, the hard drive and all these things. And unless it has the firmware and the software, it's garbage. And so the first thing that they do is they find out, what do you want? How do you want it configured? And they take this hardware and then they give it into its mind. They put all the information. This is exactly what God says about these little things that are running around. You need to take this little thing and start putting in the information that I give you into this. Deuteronomy chapter 6, this is the famous passage. Hear, O Israel, verse 4. The Lord, our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. These words, which I am commanding you today, shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your sons, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontals on your forehead. You shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Later on, at the end of the life, as it were, of the nation, in Malachi, the Lord will identify problems with families. And in that, it's a really difficult passage to interpret. I don't read any Hebrew. I have no idea what it says, but everybody that says anything about this passage says it's difficult to interpret. But all of them interpret one phrase the same. Malachi chapter 2. Verse 15, he's talking about marriages. Men, you're abusing the wives of your youth. Don't do that. But in that, not one has done so who has a remnant of the Spirit. And it doesn't matter what your version is. It's probably going to sound different from this one and from each other. But except for the one word, the two words. And what did that one do while he was seeking a, listen, godly offspring? Why does God make marriages? Well, so you can produce a godly offspring. So they're told that at the beginning, Abraham, this is why I'm giving you these children. It's in the law. At the very end of their nation, the last words he has to say to them is, you're messing up on this very thing. Timothy, some of the Israelites would teach their children. Timothy was one of those people. In 2 Timothy, chapter 3, verse 14, you, however, continue in the things you have learned and become convinced of, knowing from whom you learned them, and that from childhood you have known the sacred writings. So Timothy's mother, and in chapter 1, apparently grandmother also, had been doing exactly what they were supposed to according to the law of Moses. Here you got this little mind that comes into the world, and it's ready to absorb everything like a sponge. And God says, you put this water in that sponge. And so Timothy's parents had done that. We, under the New Testament, are told the very same thing if we have children. Ephesians 6, verse 4, fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and the instruction of the Lord. This is our goal. This is our task. This is what God has given to us. Why do I belabor this point that I talked about last week? Just to emphasize our role and the importance of it. This is the purpose of being a parent. John 21 is not about parenting per se, but is appropriate to refer to. You remember Peter had claimed, oh no, everybody else may leave you, but I won't. What a mistake to have said that. And Peter learns from it. And Jesus knows he does. And there is so much love pouring out of this passage. Verse 15. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" And you know how Simon felt. He was struck to the heart. He had messed up. I don't understand all of it. Who are these people? I'm not even about to get that. All I want to get is the love and what Jesus says or requests. He said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Tend my lambs." He said to him again a second time, "Simon, son of John, do you love me?" And he said to him, "Yes, Lord, you know that I love you." And he said to him, "Shepherd my sheep." He said to him a third time, "Simon, the son of God, do you love me?" Peter was grieved because he said to him a third time, "Do you love me?" And he said to him, "Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you." And he said to him again, "Tend my sheep." And you see the love pouring out here. Isaiah 49, God will ask, can a woman who is nursing her child forget her child? No. Hebrews 12 indicates that a father who does not discipline his child is like a woman nursing her son or daughter and forgetting it. In Hebrews 12, the idea is, of course, a loving father disciplines the children, trains the children. And this will begin as early as you possibly can. There was a young man who was brought up on a daily diet, a life diet of video games, television, and irresponsibility. By the time he's 18 now and he's about to move out. 2 months before he's going to move out, the parents approached me and asked me in a state of urgency to come and have a Bible study with this boy. Because there are some things that they've got to get right. They've got to straighten it up. The child training phase was long gone. The more you sweat in peace, the less you bleed in war. The parent's responsibility to raise the children. Today, it won't take that long. Parental perspective. We're going to talk about 4 things. Humility and ignorance, inexperience and incompetence of raising children. Number 2, perspective of providence. Number 3, reasonable action. And number 4, trust God. Humility and ignorance, inexperience, incompetence of raising children. Trust me, I'm going somewhere with this. But before we go anywhere, do you remember? Whose are these with you? So he said, the children whom God has graciously given your servant. Don't forget that. The word right there automatically implies you need to be humble about this child that's in front of you. Here are some reasons. Number 1, you've never raised one. So, I don't mean to diminish raising children when I talk about raising chickens. A few years ago, we decided to raise chickens and pigs. So I went to the Tweedies because they know things about raising chickens and pigs. And if I was going to talk about raising a pig, Gary would say, well, you need to do this and this and this and this and this. If I was going to talk about raising a chicken, Gary didn't know much about it. He knows a lot about it. But you know who he would say go talk to? Colleen. And then this is what happened every single time. Well, and then, she'd throw out some vague answer. And then I'd be like, okay, I'll go try that. And I learned a little because she was right in whatever she told me, because she knows what she's talking about. And she also knows the limit. But 3 years later now, 4 years now, you can essentially characterize my knowledge as completely ignorant. Despite all that, every day you go out and you feed them, you look at them. This is the same thing with raising children. It's been 10 years, and boy, do I feel like I've gotten nowhere. You've never raised this one. All right, year 2 of my experience, number 2 comes along. Year 3 of our chicken raising experience, I saw something I never even imagined in my entire life. One chicken, several chickens, acting like cannibals towards another chicken. I'd never seen that before. Of course, I go to the doctor, Dr. Tweedy, Mrs. Tweedy. I say, what's up with that? And they both said, yeah, sometimes that happens. Well, that's helpful. One child is as different from another child as he or she is the same. You've never raised this one in this situation. Now, you may have raised this one in a very similar situation, but that was yesterday, or last month, or last year. Things have changed. Or you may have raised the other one in this situation, but now you're raising this one in this situation. We are trying to sell our house. We go to the realtors. We interviewed 3 of them, just for the fun of it. More than just for the fun of it, but to get a grasp. And there are some times where I wanted to get specific information from them. And they really hesitated to give it to me. And some of them would say, I've sold the same property multiple times. But when the next person came and it was time for me to sell their property again, I had to be, and I'm paraphrasing, careful about what I said. Because every situation is different. Now let me ask you something. What's more difficult? Selling 6.5 acres or raising a 6-year-old? You never know all the outside influences, good and bad. You might think you do. Then we got to go into another room here and talk. No, you don't. And then you never know all the inner thoughts. You don't know what's going on inside. There's temptation to do right, and there's the tug to do wrong. Romans 7. Do you know that Romans 7 also applies to little children? At some point. Romans 7:14, we know that the law is spiritual. I am of the flesh, sold into bondage of sin. For what I'm doing, I got to restate this. I don't know exactly when children become sold into the bondage of sin, but at some point they start this wrestle. For what I'm doing, I do not understand. I do not practice what I would like to do, but I'm doing the very thing that I hate. And all of us have seen, even our own children. You've got the one that has the heart where you just say, you've made a mistake, and they're just crying already. And then you got the other one. But this tug of war here. Now, you got this little child, and she getting bigger and bigger, and they obey. Now, do you know that they've obeyed because they want to, or just because they're afraid of the stick? You don't even know that. You don't know their heart. You just never know. That's what it really boils down to. Some of you will recognize this quote. There are known knowns. There are things we know we know. We also know there are known unknowns. That is to say, we know some things we do not know. We know that there are some things that we do not know. But there are also unknown unknowns. The ones we don't know that we don't know. The latter category, it is the latter category that tend to be the difficult ones. Actually, when it comes to raising children, they're all difficult. What this should call for in us is a sense of humility as parents. I don't know. I love it when people come and ask me. It doesn't happen often, I get that. But I love it when people come and ask me for advice on their children. Right. I don't know. Not many months ago, my daughter and I went to a University of Tennessee basketball game. And I was impressed at the confidence these young basketball players had. They would drive to the hoop. like it was their world. And then they'd miss. And the next time down, they do the same thing again, like what just happened had never happened before. And they do this over time again. The confidence, when there should have been, after a while, the coach yanks you, right? He says, no, stop this. This repetitive. We have to be humble. What was they saying? I am truly sensible of the high honor done me in this appointment, yet I feel great distress from consciousness that my abilities and experience may not be equal to the extensive and important trust. I do not think myself equal to the command I am honored with. Now, all that to make this point, which I'm going to dance around for the rest of this lesson. Humbly recognizing ignorance and inexperience. Humbly recognizing ignorance, inexperience, and incompetence, especially including your personal character flaws and behavioral faults. I recognize I don't know what I'm doing. I'm incompetent. I'm ignorant. On top of that, I've got big, bad problems myself. Now, having recognized that, and then looking at your child, and you realize, hey, there's some success going on there, necessarily implies that that success had more to do with something outside of your control than it did in your own control. There's a famous expression, it is not in mortals to command success. It is not in mortals to command. We can't say, boom, I will be successful. We cannot do it. It doesn't matter what it is. We cannot. In the Bible, God, be turning to Daniel 4. In the Bible, God likens souls to cities. Proverbs 25:28. Like a city that has been broken into and without walls is a man who has no control over his spirit. In the Bible, God likens souls to cities. Proverbs 16:32. He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who captures a city. I want to make a point about a perspective a man has of his city and apply it to our perspective of our children. Daniel 4, verse 30. The king reflected and said, "Is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself built as a royal residence by the might of my power and for the glory of my majesty?" And you all know the verse 31. While the word was in the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven saying, King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared, sovereignty has been removed from you, and you will be driven away from mankind in your dwelling place and be with the beasts of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass until you recognize that the Most High is the ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whomever he wishes. Had Nebuchadnezzar done something with Babylon? You bet he had. But when it came to perspective, who's the one that's really controlling what's going on? God in heaven. Here's my point. Any success, and you will have them, thanks be to God, you will have success. But that says less about you, that says less about me, than it says about there is a God, and He is working behind the scene in this situation. This brings us to perspective of providence. Any positive outcome in child training has less to do with you and your action, your intervention, your prompting, your guiding, than it does factors beyond your control. Your training is necessary. Now, in this lesson, I don't want to diminish that you need to take an active part in training. That will be for the rest of the sermons. This one is really about, as much as you're doing that, that's not really what's creating the outcome that we're looking for. An Olympian said, it was something that was put in front of me because that's what my abilities allowed. Said no honest and wise parent ever. The horse is prepared for the day of battle. You do your part. But victory belongs to the Lord. Commit your works to the Lord and your plans will be established. And here's one. Unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. Unless the Lord guards the city, the watchman keeps awake in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to retire late, to eat the bread of painful labors. For he gives to his beloved even in his sleep. Somebody else, Bill Nye, the science guy, I've read this before, said, I am a speck. Now he, in this statement, is saying there is no God. He's wrong. He says, I am a speck among specks, on a speck, orbiting a speck, in the middle of specklessness. There is no God, is his point. Now he's wrong about that. But this somewhat captures the reality of the illusion of control. We are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet in a very average star. Wrong. But sometimes I feel like a monkey when I'm trying to train my children. A not-so-smart man walks up to the counter of a library and says, I'd like a cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke. The librarian says, look around, this is a library. Oh, how silly of me, says the man. And then whispers, I'd like a cheeseburger, fries, and a Coke. How exasperating. And how exasperating I must be to God when he says, Lee, I gave you these 4 souls, and why are you doing this again? Why didn't you do that? It's right there. It's plain on the nose in your face. Why is it you're messing up? Again, we make the point. Any success is less about me than it is about our God in heaven. And to claim success is to misappropriate from God in heaven. Joseph and Mary. Was Jesus perfect because of Joseph and Mary? You can illustrate it because he had brothers and sisters who were not perfect. God, I don't understand how all that works, was working behind the scenes. Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel. Was Abel perfect because of Adam and Eve? He wasn't perfect. Was he good enough? We'd all like what is said of Abel to be said of my children and your children in Hebrews chapter 11, by faith. Did he become such a success story because of his parents? Well, look at Cain. No, I'm not saying they didn't have something to do with it. But where do you attribute success to? But God himself. Ezekiel 18 illustrates this. Verse 4, I referred to this earlier. All souls are mine. The soul of the Father as well as the soul of the Son is mine. The soul who sins will die. But if a man is righteous and practices justice and righteousness, and does not eat at the mountain of shrines, or lift up his eyes to idols of the house of Israel, or defile his neighbor's wife, or approach a young woman during her menstrual period, if a man does not oppress anyone, but restores to the debtor his pledge, it does not commit robbery, but gives his bread to the hungry and covers the naked with clothing, if he does not lend money on the interest or take increase, if he keeps his hand from iniquity and executes true justice between man and man, if he walks in my statutes and my ordinances so as to deal faithfully, he is righteous and will surely live. So here you've got a guy that's great. And if he has children, because he is walking in his statutes and ordinances, Deuteronomy 6 says, teach your children. If this man's doing that and he has children, he's teaching his children. Well, what happens in verse 10? Then he may have a violent son who sheds blood and who does and who does any of these things to a brother, so on and so forth. And then that person has a son in verse 14 who turns out to be good. I'm not saying that you shouldn't participate. You need to. But in the end, it's on God and that soul that you're training. God is watching. Moses was lovely in the sight of God when he was a baby. You shall not afflict any widow or orphan. We're talking about a young child here. If you afflict him at all, if he cries out to me, I will surely hear his cry. God is watching. In you, the orphan finds mercy. The orphan here is crying out, and God is listening. Romans 8:28, we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love God. Only adults, though, right? No. To everybody. The eyes of the Lord move to and fro throughout the earth that he may strongly support those whose heart is completely his, including little children. That's what he wants. He talks about the little children all through the Gospels. 1 Kings 14. Jeroboam, who caused the idolatry in northern Israel, has a son who's sick. He sends his wife to a prophet, a real prophet. God had told the wife the prophet, the wife was coming disguised. Verse 7, the prophet says to the wife, to go back to Jeroboam, go to Jeroboam, say, thus says the Lord God of Israel, because I exalted you from the people, and made you leader over my people Israel, and tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you, yet you have not been like my servant David, who kept the commandments and who followed me with all his heart, to do only that which is right in my sight. You have done more evil than all who were before you. So here's Dad. He's evil. But remember, she's asking about the son. Long story short, the son is going to die. God is going to take the child's life. Why? Verse 12, arise, go to your house. When your feet enter the city, the child will die. All Israel shall mourn for him and bury him. For he alone of Jeroboam's family will come to the grave, because in him something good was found toward the Lord God of Israel in the house of Jeroboam. Was God watching this little child? And something good was in this child. Was that from the father? The father was evil. First Samuel. 1 Samuel 2, another illustration that it has less to do with the parenting, or the parent, I should say, than it does God. I'm not removing the parent's responsibility. I'm trying to drive in a perspective. You think of God while you're going through all of this. 1 Samuel 2, verse 12. The sons of Eli were worthless men. That's all you need to know about that. They grow up, they're worthless. Now, along comes Samuel, is delivered into his charge when Samuel's weaned, so very young. Samuel, y'all know, grows up to be very faithful. How? Was that Eli, who we already knew blew it? Look in verse 11. The boy ministered to the Lord. Look in verse 18. Samuel was ministering before the Lord. Verse 21. The boy Samuel grew before the Lord. Verse 26. The boy Samuel was growing in stature and favor both with the Lord and with men. Chapter 3, verse 1. The boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord. Now listen. Verse 19. Samuel grew, and here's the key phrase we're looking for. And the Lord was with him. That is why Samuel grew up to be who he was. Yes, Eli had something to do with it. So did Hannah. But God is the one that we attribute success to, if you will. So, the last point is this. Take reasonable action and trust in God. At the close of the last sermon, I ended with realize the role of the parent and the importance of parenting. And I challenged you. You have 3 weeks, have had 3 weeks to think about this. The challenge was this. Having realized the role of the parent and the importance of the parenting, just promise to commit to whatever God says, you'll do it. I mean, this is our role anyway, our rule and our role. I want to end with this sermon, the first how. How do I raise a child? The first how is this. Trust God. Trust God. It is always the case with every act of faith. The act is necessary, but it is never sufficient. Baptism. Necessary? Yes. God says all over the Bible, he who has believed and been baptized will be saved. All over the Bible. Okay, so I go out and I get myself baptized. Does that inherently qualify me? Am I now ready? God, give me the kingdom. I was baptized. No, other than he promised me. So he reaches down in his grace, Colossians 2, and he says, look, I'll save anyone who calls out to me by faith in baptism. So you've got the act, and you'll do it. But there's the faith behind the act. We talk about praying for patience. Well, pray for patience. At the end of the day, if you are more patient, you don't attribute it to that prayer. You attribute it to the Father who's answering the prayer. And whatever happened in between. At the end of the day, you don't say, I made myself more patient. No, you did participate, no doubt about it. But it was faith in him. It is the same with raising children. The last passage, 1 Samuel chapter 1. This is where Hannah gives birth. Verse 5, the Lord had closed her womb. So, she prays. Verse 10. She was greatly distressed, prayed to the Lord, and wept bitterly. Now she has the faith of Sarah here. In Hebrews 11 it says, by faith Sarah even herself received ability to conceive. Yeah, Hannah has the faith to understand God's in control here. Yeah, I'm participating, but God is the one that's in control. So, then she goes up the temple. She's still praying. She receives a child. The name Samuel sounds like, it's a pun, it sounds like asked of God. The name means she asked God. Look in verse 27. She comes back to Eli. Verse 27, for this boy I prayed, and the Lord has, listen, given me my petition. Remember how we started this sermon? God gives for a purpose. She understands this. She knows God. She understands what's happening here. She understands that for whatever time I have to train this child to love the Lord. Now, here's the question. She goes to God. She doesn't have a child. She goes to him. She says, Lord, I need your help in bearing a child. And then she has a child. And then when it comes time to raising the child, she says, I got this all by myself, God. That makes no sense. No, she understands that every act must be performed with faith in God, that he's the one doing the work. As much as that doesn't make sense, that she would say, God, I need your help in bearing a child, but when it comes to raising him, I got this all by myself. As much as that doesn't make sense, it also doesn't make sense that God would give you or me his most important possession and then abandon us. That makes no sense. In fact, not only will he not abandon us, but he won't even let us take control. So yesterday, I had my four-wheeler stuck. It was towing a trailer. I went and got my little tractor. I hook up the chain to the four-wheeler. I say, hey, Raph, who's 5, get on the four-wheeler. Steer it for me. So he steers. I got a video of it. You don't want to watch it. Left. He goes right. He goes right. He gets off that. He goes inside. I drove the four-wheeler. He did a great, great job. But he didn't drive the four-wheeler. I had it hooked up to a chain, and I could have yanked that thing any way I wanted to. But, as much as I did allow him, he did an excellent job. God delivers children to us and says, I'm going to let you participate in the upbringing of these children. And you have a lot of influence on them. In the end, when they turn out all right, it's because God was in control. You were just an overpaid helper. There is a third joke, A lion is walking through the jungle, goes up to the monkey and says, hey, who's the king of the jungle? The monkey says, you are, lion. Goes up to the snake, who's the king of the jungle? You are, lion. Goes up to everybody, you're the king, you're the king. Goes up to the elephant takes his trunk, lifts up the lion, throws him in the air, smashes him to the ground, and the lion gets up and says, well, you don't have to get upset about it because you just don't know the answer. We do not have to be so clueless. In raising children, there is a God who is doing most of the work for us. Now, you have to work and you will struggle. But remember this, your child's world isn't on your back. It's on God. It's in His hands. You have to work. And I tell you what, that makes it a lot easier. Understanding that I will do what I understand is reasonable. And I will pray to God that He continues to perform His work on this little soul. If a sea couldn't stop Moses and God, if a wall couldn't stop Joshua and God, if a giant couldn't stop God and David, if death couldn't stop Jesus, then nothing will stop you from raising your children the way God wants you to, if you trust in Him and obey. Thank you for your listening.